My boss took me to a concert and my husband agreed. But when I got back, there was a letter. I don't know how I'm going to start this right now. It's too heavy for me to pour out what has happened to me within the last few weeks. As I'm typing this, my heart is heavy and my eyes are swollen up because of my constant cries within the past few days. I have cried, begged, and even done a lot of things to solve the problem, but it isn't working. My husband agreed to let me go with my boss to a concert only for me to come back to meet a breakup letter. I'm trying to understand something here. Is this really fair? Why did my husband have to do such a thing to me? Hi Reddit, my name is Jessica and I am 26 years old. I work at a private company as a personal assistant to my boss. This is just a way of me trying to not damage the image of the company because I don't want any more drama. I've been working with my boss for 4 years. We have really come a long way and wouldn't want to complicate things further. My husband's name is Layden. He is a 27-year-old estate agent construction manager. Layden and I have been married for 2 years. I know what you all would be thinking right now, that 2 years is actually too early to get a divorce, right? Yes, I know it is, and it's so heartbreaking knowing that my marriage failed due to my stupidity. Layden and I have really come a long way, and I'm shocked to see that this is where it ends for us. I have known Layden since I started working at my boss's company. Layden and my boss happened to be best of friends. It was from there I got close to Layden and we started talking. Though we started off on the wrong foot. Layden was a snobbish type of guy that didn't like to easily talk to ladies. He was the ladies' type, and any woman would love to be that type of person because of how handsome and well-dressed Landon looked. Anytime I wanted to have a conversation with him, the conversation would end up really bad and I would end up regretting it. I hated him then because of that. I thought maybe he wanted to keep it professional with me since I worked for his friend who is my boss. At that time, I wasn't a personal assistant, I was a recruiter at the company. My boss liked the services I provided and he made me his personal assistant. That happened when Layden and I got married. Guys, that was another story on its own, but I would talk about it as we go further. So, guys, judging from what I have said, you all would be wondering how a construction manager and a private company owner were friends, right? Well, my husband and my boss have known each other since high school. They have been friends since then. That's the little I know about them. I didn't care to know more details about their friendship or how they started because it wasn't none of my business. Yes, that wasn't my concern at that time. All I was interested in was to get close to Layden then. Like I said earlier, we started off on the wrong foot because Layden was not an easy type of guy. My boss at that time didn't know that I was hitting on his friend even though I pretended not to like Layden because I always said nasty things about him any time we were alone. My boss and I were a little bit close then because I was smart and hardworking. Let's say, I was his most favorite among the staff. But our relationship was kept professional. Did I like my boss then? No, I can't say for him though. The only person I liked then was Layden, but I didn't like how snobbish he was. Long story cut short, guys, Layden and I became friends at some point. The few hours I spent with him made me realize that I judged him wrongly. That's why it's good to get close to someone to know their type of person before judging them. Who would have thought that Layden was one of the sweetest guys ever? Beneath that snobbish guy is a nice and caring person. I loved Layden the moment I saw him. Even though my marriage with him is going to come to an end, I definitely did not regret all the moments that we shared together. I hate to admit that I was responsible for us getting a divorce, guys. This is my first time here, and I hope I won't come back here again for something like this. But right now, I really need you guys' help on how to go about this. It has gotten out of my control and that of my family and friends because we have tried everything to make Layden come around, but it isn't working. I don't know what to do again. I really don't want to divorce my husband for so many reasons. Come on. We are barely even exploring our marriage like we should have. I know Layden is mad at me, but I just wished he could give our marriage a second chance. I haven't been the best wife to him, and I want to start now. Guys, is it too late already? I really miss him so much. I want you all to advise me on what to do because at this point, I'm already losing my mind. All I want is to get back with my husband and start afresh. We were so much in love with each other, and I didn't know what happened that we drifted apart. Well, me though, because Layden was always there. I was just so blind to not have seen it. If I had known, I wouldn't have been so close with my boss the way I was because that was where the problem started. Yes, guys. My closeness with my boss got out of hand and my husband wasn't comfortable with it. Yes, I know I met my boss before we got married to each other, but I should have drawn a border between us when Layden and I started dating, but I didn't. Like I said earlier, I was a recruiter in the company when I met Layden. 4 months after Layden and I got married to each other, my boss gave me the offer to be his personal assistant. Considering the fact that we were somehow close to each other, I got married to his friend. Such an offer could be tempting, right? Yeah, it was to me and I couldn't say no to it because I was going to get paid double of whatever was my monthly income. That was what I wanted. I worked so I could get paid and take care of my bills and not leave it for my husband alone. Layden was capable of footing all of it, but I still wanted to help him out, even though he never complained about it being a burden to him. That was all I wanted at that time, but I didn't know that the job offer would cost me a lot. Being a personal assistant to my boss was one of the biggest mistakes I have ever made in my life. Don't get me wrong, guys. It's okay to be a personal assistant to your boss, just that mine didn't work for me, and because it didn't work for me doesn't mean that it's bad or won't work out for you. All I'm trying to say is that my job as a personal assistant was more than that. I hate to admit it, but I started going out with my boss when he offered me that job. Guys, I never planned to have a relationship with my boss. Also, I had no idea at that time that my boss was hitting on me. He had feelings for me, and according to him, he didn't know how to express himself to me. How would you guys react if your boss tells you that after 4 months of being married? It took my boss that long to confess his feelings to me. I didn't know that things would turn out this way. Like what every other person in my shoes would do at that time, I accepted the job offer. The offer was given to me at the office, and I accepted it wholeheartedly. I broke the news to my husband when I got home. His reaction caught me off guard because that was not what I expected. Instead of Layden being happy for me at that moment, he was a little bit upset that I couldn't wait to get back home for us to have a conversation about it before I accepted the offer. Before Layden and I got married, we agreed to have each other involved in taking any important decision. His anger at that moment was a little bit valid, but I had expected more from him. I accept. I broke the agreement we made, but guys, wasn't that supposed to have been a happy moment? I apologized to him, but Layden wasn't having it. My husband told me that he wasn't comfortable with me being a personal assistant to my boss. I asked why he had a problem with that, and Layden said it just doesn't make any sense. My husband also told me that my boss and I were more than too close to each other to be his personal assistant. I was shocked to hear Layden say that. I asked him why he had a problem with how my boss and I were closed, and told him that we were like that before I even met him. Layden told me that I was getting it all wrong, and said he isn't trying to stop me from working, but I should know when to draw boundaries between my boss, because I was a married woman. Layden even made an instance where my boss hugged me inappropriately at a dinner party we both attended together. My husband said he wasn't happy with the way he hugged me, and he told me about it there. I didn't understand what my husband was trying to tell me then. I was excited about my new job and got carried away with the excitement. For about an hour, me and Layden got into an argument about the new job. He had a problem with the way my bosses were close to each other, and he didn't hide it from me like what a responsible husband would do. I was just so stupid to not have understood where he was coming from. The handwriting on the wall was clear for me to have read it, but I didn't. Accepting that job offer was the beginning of my problem. My closeness to my boss got worse when I got married. My boss was overly nice to me, and I didn't know what had gotten into him at that time. In fact, he asked me to go out with him to have lunch, sometimes dinner, or even breakfast. Before I got married, my boss and I weren't that close to the extent of him asking me to have a lunch, dinner, or breakfast date with him. Like I said earlier, we kept the relationship professional but intensified when I got married. There were times my boss deliberately gave me lots of files to work on, so I wouldn't get out of the office early. When other staff closed from work, I would be the only one with him at the office. According to him, he enjoys my company. Guys, because of that, I always missed out on important dates or hangouts with my husband. I was never around any time we discussed spending time with each other after work. That really affected my relationship with my husband, but I didn't know. Most of the argument Layden and I had were centered around me coming back home late, long hours after the initial close of work. My boss was indirectly trying to break into my home and I couldn't notice it. Tell me how my boss would keep me at work for long hours at the office after the initial close hour. If he had liked me, he should have told me beforehand, not him. Even though my boss is to blame for this, I myself am guilty here. I should have kept him at arm's length the day Layden and I got married. My boss interfered in my marriage and I'm just realizing that. He was the third party they said couples should be mindful of in marriage. I was the foolish one that entertained the so-called party. You all wouldn't blame me. I was just trying to keep my job and also maintain the relationship I had with my boss. What got my husband pissed the most was the day that I showed up late for our 1-year wedding anniversary dinner. My husband was so mad at me that I didn't even know what to do at that moment. On my way to the venue, I already knew that Layden would be mad at me, but it was better I show up than I didn't at all. On my way there, I was anxious about how my husband would react because I was scared. Guys? What guys? When I got to the venue, I was told by the waitress that my husband had left. He told them to tell me any time I arrived. Apparently, Layden made a reservation for the two of us to celebrate our 1-year anniversary together, but I messed it up. My husband left because I was 5 hours late. It was very bad, and I keep regretting it any time I remember. My excuse for being late was that my boss had held me back at the office to sort out a few files before leaving the office that day. Even when I told him that I had an important dinner with my husband, he didn't listen and threatened me with my job. I was confused about what I would do. At the end of the day, I chose work over dinner. I thought I would be fast in finishing it up on time, but unfortunately I couldn't. At that time, my phone wasn't with me because I was carried away with the work and I missed Layden's calls and text messages. That was why he left the dinner date before I could arrive. When I got home, I met Layden very angry and furious. He asked me to give him a good reason why I had to miss our first anniversary. At that moment, I couldn't come up with any reasonable excuse. I told him what kept me late at work, and Layden was so mad to hear me say that. Layden asked me if my work was so important to him that I couldn't spare a few minutes for us to spend with each other. My husband was so mad at me that he left home that day. Layden left for 2 days and didn't tell me where he was heading to at that moment. I couldn't reach out to him. At that time, my boss had no idea about what was happening between Layden and I. I didn't tell him because I felt like it wouldn't be okay if I start telling my boss everything in my marriage. I also suspected that Layden also kept it away from his boss. My problem with Layden was why he couldn't talk to his friend, who was my boss, about the way he was close to me. I don't know if they ever had that conversation, though. Anyone I told this to always blamed me for not setting the boundaries my husband talked about. Most of the people said my husband had every right to be angry because I couldn't balance work and my marriage. After that, I realized that I was indeed wrong, but it's too late to cry over spilled milk. So guys, after 2 days, my husband returned back from wherever he had gone. We gave each other the silent treatment for days because we were still mad at each other. After some time, we came back together. Our relationship wasn't as it was, but we kept pushing. A few months after my 1-year anniversary, my boss confessed his feelings to me. He told me that he liked me and would want us to start a relationship. My boss was aware that I was married to his friend, but he didn't care about that. Before I could say anything at that moment, he kissed me, and I couldn't stop him. Then my relationship with my husband was rocky at that time. It was from one argument to another. I used that moment to console myself. My boss and I kissed in the office when everyone had closed from work that day. That day was the day my boss confessed to me that he deliberately kept me at work just so we could spend time with each other more because he enjoyed my company. That night, I didn't know how to react to what he told me. For some strange reason, I enjoyed every time I spent with my boss more than I did with Layden. That day, my boss and I made out in his office. From that moment, he asked me out and I agreed. I wasn't drunk when I made out with my boss for the first time, so I won't blame it on alcohol. And also, my boss didn't force me to do it. So guys, my boss and I had an affair for 1 year and a few months and Layden didn't know. Well, that was what I thought at that time. But my husband was way smarter than I thought. Guys Layden did were so shocking and surprising. My husband was 2 steps ahead of me. Layden hired a private investigator to keep an eye on me as he saw that my closeness with my boss got out of hand. Yes, I was also shocked when I learned about that. Even though what happened between my boss and I at the office that night was a mistake, I still couldn't cut him off. In fact, we started going out as couples, went to different hotels to chill out for a few hours before heading back home. Sometimes I visited my boss at his home. Anytime Layden was out of time for a work contract, I usually spent the night at my boss's place. I was happy that I got all the freedom I wanted anytime my husband was not around. I thought at that moment that I was living my best life, but I didn't know that I was literally using my hands to destroy the beautiful home I was trying to build with Layden. A lot of things happened that I keep regretting. I'm not proud of everything I did with my boss. We were just too close to be only boss and employee. The relationship intensified and we had an affair together. I'm actually disappointed in myself right now. I have cried to the extent that I can't anymore. My eyes are swollen and are hurting really bad because I have been crying out my eyes since the past few days. At this point, I would need to go on therapeutic sessions because it's as if I'm losing my mind and the mistakes I made were supposed to have been avoided, but I didn't do that. Instead, I allowed it to destroy my marriage. Guys, the affair my boss and I were having was kept a secret. We acted as professionals in front of the staff. Everyone knew that I was married, and it wouldn't have made any sense to be dating the boss. Even though some had their suspicions about us because of the way we were closed, we still kept it a secret. So, guys, Jay, just about a month ago, my boss bought tickets for the two of us to go to a concert together. I had no plans on going to the concert from the beginning. The tickets were given to me as a surprise from my boss. The night of the concert, my husband and I were supposed to go to a book club meeting together. I was confused at that point on which to choose. The concert in question was one of my favorite concerts. It was a solo concert and my favorite artist was hosting. I had no idea about it, not until my boss bought the tickets for the both of us. Guys, it was jaw-dropping for me that I couldn't resist it. Besides, the book club wouldn't have been more interesting than the concert anyway. And so I went to the concert. Before that day, I didn't know what to tell Layden that I wouldn't be going to the book club with him. I thought of what to tell him and I didn't want to lie to him. At that time, my relationship with Layden improved. It was a few weeks after our second-year wedding anniversary. After much thought, I decided to tell him about the concert and who got the tickets for me. On the morning of the concert, I told my husband that I wouldn't be going with him to the book club meeting because I wanted to go to a solo concert. I told him that the concert was really important to me at that time because it was my favorite artist that was hosting. I also told Layden that my boss got the tickets because he knew how much I loved the artist. I told my husband not to be angry with me, and I promised to make it up to him. For a few seconds, Layden didn't say a word. When he finally did, he told me to go and have fun. He even told me that the book club would be more boring for me and that I should go to the concert. Guys, to say I was shocked by Layden's response at that moment is an understatement. Layden that I knew before that day would have caused a sense, but he didn't. In fact, Layden even offered to drop me off before heading to the book club meeting, but I refused. So, guys, when it was time for the concert, I got dressed and headed out. My husband was at home at the time I left. I was very excited that night because I was going to watch my favorite artist play a solo song. I was a bit down that time to not have gone with my husband as we planned. That feeling lasted for a few minutes and I was over it. My boss and I got to the concert on time. My boss saw how excited I was about the concert. I didn't even know how to express how happy I was at that time. I enjoyed every minute I spent at the concert with my boss. The most interesting thing that happened was that I was able to take a few pictures with my favorite artist. While at the concert, I kept updating my husband about it. I even sent him the pictures I took and told him how I was enjoying the night. Layden read all the messages but didn't reply. I thought maybe he didn't have the time to reply to text messages at that moment, and so I didn't let that bother me. I wanted to enjoy the moment with my boss and not let anything ruin the night for me. After the concert ended, we decided to go have a drink at a club. The night was too young and I didn't want to go home that early. I didn't want to be alone at home because my husband was going to be home the next day. The book club meeting was more like a sleepover. So guys, my boss took me to a club and we had a lot to drink. We reminisced on how the concert went, and it was fun. From there, we also went to a hotel. I knew that my husband wouldn't be back home, so I took advantage of that. My boss and I went to a hotel and spent the night together. The next morning, I left the hotel very early because I didn't want Layden to get back home before me so he wouldn't know that I slept out the previous night. My boss couldn't see why I was rushing to go home. He even proposed we stop the hide and seek and tell my husband about us. I knew at that moment that my boss would have been under the influence of alcohol for him to have said that to me. That morning, I wasn't in the mood to exchange any words with him and ignored whatever he was saying. We left the hotel and my boss dropped me off before he went home. When I got home, I was surprised that I didn't see Layden's car outside by that time. On our way home, I was a bit anxious that I would meet Layden at home because it was past 9 in the morning, and he would have returned before that time. I won't lie, I was very happy that I got back before him though. I went into the house to freshen up and do some house chores before Layden would return. When I got in, I noticed that something was wrong with the living room. I couldn't figure it out immediately. Just when I was about to go upstairs, something caught my attention. It was a piece of paper with a brown envelope on the dining table. Usually I would have ignored that because I was used to that being around the house because of the nature of my husband's job. But I was tempted to see what it was. I got closer to the piece of paper, and I discovered that it was a written letter. I opened it to read the content of the letter, and I was very surprised. I still can't get over what I have read even though it's been a month already. The letter was written by my husband telling me how disappointed he was in marrying a cheater and a liar. Layden stated that he regretted knowing me and even getting married to me. Also, the letter stated that I had the audacity to cheat on Layden with his friend who was my boss and had no shame whatsoever. At that moment, I was numbed for a few seconds. My hands and legs were shaking uncontrollably at once. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I thought that was it, but didn't know that something even worse than that was waiting for me in the brown envelope. It was stated in the letter that I should open the envelope, which I did. Guys, I grasped for air when I saw what was in the envelope. Inside the envelope were pictures of me and my boss together kissing, hugging, and holding hands together. There were also pictures of us at the hotel together. At that point, I knew that my secret affair was no longer a secret any longer. In less than a few minutes, I was sweating profusely, and my chest was beating so fast. To conclude everything, my husband stated that he had relocated from the neighborhood to somewhere far away from me. He also said that it would be great if I signed the divorce papers as soon as possible, and that it would be better for the both of us. I couldn't believe everything that was happening at that moment. It was just like a dream to me at that time. I picked up my phone to call Layden and tell him to stop the expensive joke with me. Layden rejected all my calls and didn't reply to any of my messages. While at that, my phone started buzzing non-stop. It was Layden that was sending me messages. I opened it only to see more pictures of me and my boss. The pictures were taken when my boss and I were at the concert. My husband had a private investigator follow me, and I had no ideas about it. Whoever the private investigator was did a very good job. These pictures were closely taken. At that moment, I didn't know when I started crying after going through everything. My husband wasn't picking up any of my calls. Immediately, I called my boss to tell him about the new development, but my boss also wasn't picking up. For a few minutes, I teared up really badly because my marriage with my husband was coming to an end. Guys, that was not all. Layden relocated to another town and sold the house we were living in. I had 24 hours to leave the house. My husband knew I had nowhere to go, but he sold off the house we were living in, property that we bought together, and he sold it without my knowledge. He had everything planned out, and I couldn't figure it out. I waited for my boss to call, but he didn't call me back, so I decided to pack up and move out from the house before the new buyers came. In tears, I stood up and went upstairs. That morning, it was from one surprise to the other. Guys, I got into our room only to find out that everything was gone. My clothes and accessories were all gone. The wardrobe was also empty. I screamed so loud and said to myself that Layden was pulling a prank on me. I was panting heavily and thought about how to reach out to my husband. I called and texted, but no response. It got to a point where my husband blocked all my lines just so I wouldn't disturb him any longer. I was furious at that moment, knowing that all my wardrobe got wiped out and nothing was left for me. I left the house with the letter and brown envelope to boss, SS house. When I got there, I met my boss covered up with bruises. Apparently, Layden paid my boss a visit and beat him to a pulp. My boss couldn't reply to his phone as at the time I called because he was getting beaten by Layden. I felt bad for my boss because the beating was bad. My boss was so mad at me that he didn't want to let me in, but I pleaded with him to let me in because I had nowhere to go. After much thought, he allowed me to stay with him, and that was because I offered to help him dress his bruises. I didn't understand why my boss was mad at me that day, whereas it was his fault. If he had not confessed his feelings to me, maybe we wouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. All my credit cards, clothes, and valuables were all taken away from me. All my savings were swapped out by Layden. Right now, as I'm writing this, I don't know where my husband is right now. Layden is somewhere in town, but lied to me that he had relocated just so he wouldn't see me. My family members are able to reach out to him through text messages. They have pleaded on my behalf, but Layden is just so difficult. I couldn't reach him because he had blocked me on all platforms. Update. I can't really believe that I'm back here for an update. I honestly thought I would come back to delete this post because this advice was going to work. But it's so unfortunate that it didn't work out. Instead of giving me advice on how to fix my marriage, a lot of you guys were saying nasty things about me. Some were happy that my husband treated me that way. It's been 9 months and I'm here to give out an update about everything that happened. Layden's decision about getting a divorce was final. Nothing I did at that time changed his mind. Our divorce was finalized in court and it was heartbreaking. The fact that our marriage was barely 2 years old made me so mad at myself. The court dissolved our marriage and I got nothing tangible from it. The last time I saw Layden was during the court case, and I don't think I would see him any soon because he had finally relocated to another town like he stated in the town. My ex-husband had no reasonable explanation about my valuables when we met in court. I couldn't do anything but cry. I really messed things up for myself. In all of this, what really got me more upset was the way my boss treated me. My divorce was heartbreaking, but how I was treated by my boss was overly unacceptable. All this time that my boss and I were having an affair, he never for once mentioned that he had a girlfriend. I got to know about this mystery girlfriend one fateful day. That day, my boss and I were at home together going about our normal day when the doorbell rang. My boss was closer to the door at that time, and so he opened the door, and it happened to be a lady that I hadn't seen before. But my boss and the lady had some chemistry. Right in front of me, they hugged and kissed each other, and I was shocked. After they were done, the lady noticed my presence and asked my boss who I was. Guys, you all wouldn't believe it. My boss had the audacity to introduce me to this lady as his ordinary personal assistant, and that I was nothing more than that. My boss told her that I had come over to the house to give him some files that I was about to head out when she arrived. The lady even had the nerve to order me to take her bags into the room. At that moment, I couldn't take the embarrassment, and I introduced myself as my boss's girlfriend. My boss denied me and said he had only one girlfriend, which was the lady in front of me. Her name was Helen. My boss said Helen and him had been in a long-distance relationship for a few months then, and didn't want me to ruin the relationship for him. He told Helen that I was just being jealous of them. Helen didn't like me for some reason and told my boss to sack me immediately. Guys, that was how I lost my job within a few seconds. My boss told me not to come to work again and told me that he would email my sack letter to me, which he did. I didn't know what to do to myself that day. My boss chased me out of his house even though he knew that I had nowhere to go. The past few months haven't been easy for me, guys. All that I went through within the past few months feels like a dream to me. If this is actually a dream, I really wish to wake up from it as soon as possible. This is a horrible nightmare.